Hey guys, welcome to Y&R Daily News YouTube channel. Today's topics: Thursday, October 9th. The timing of Jill's return could not have been more combustible for Genoa City, or for the volatile axis formed by Billy Kane, and every ambition that has ever run through the Abbott and Ashby families. Word of her arrival spreads like an electrical current through the corporate corridors and private hallways, where deals are whispered and grudges are stored. And almost immediately, the city is pulled into a slow-motion collision between past secrets and present schemes. Billy prepares with the restlessness of someone who believes he is finally steering Abbott Communications into the future on his own terms, while Kane stiffens behind a polished exterior, calculating the risks a truth-telling Jill might pose to the carefully threaded plans he has been advancing under the surface. Everyone understands that Jill never re-enters a scene without an agenda. The uncertainty this time is whether she is coming to mend what she helped create, or to append complacency and force accountability where denial has taken root. When she steps back onto Genoa City soil, she carries not just authority and experience, but also a promise that the veil over the paternity question linking Billy and Kane will lift. That revelation alone threatens to redraw loyalties that have long been transactional. If they share more than the city's history, if their father's choices reached further than anyone admitted, then the brothers in conflict may find themselves bound by a truth they never asked for, and responsibilities they've spent years avoiding. And if the truth reveals something more jagged, if misdirection and cover-ups were used to shield reputations at the expense of their identities, then Jill's disclosure will not simply connect two men. It will detonate the stories they tell about themselves. In the days leading to her return, Kane has nurtured the GC takeover blueprint like a private garden, pruning the messy parts, disguising the roots. The move has always been shrewd rather than noble, and he knows it. He has made promises to shadow partners, dangled incentives before opportunists, and pressed on weak seams inside rival boards with the practiced patience of someone who believes persistence will outlast suspicion. Jill's decision to speak freely about the past threatens this choreography because nothing disrupts a quiet consolidation of power like a sudden public reckoning. Accountability forces timelines to accelerate or collapse. If Kane's leverage depends on uncertainty, Jill's insistence on clarity is a direct counter-strategy. Even before she says a word, the rumor of her candor rattles Kane's allies, and the subtle shifts in their posture tell him what he needs to know. His window is narrowing. Simultaneously, Billy finds the spotlight turning toward his newest gambit at Abbott Communications. He has been playing faster than usual, restructuring editorial focus, experimenting with cross-platform ventures, teasing a high-risk expansion that would reposition the company as both storyteller and marketplace. It is a visionary push, but an exposed one, and the board has started to ask for proof that the runway will hold. Into that uncertainty steps Sally, who, whatever else she may be, understands the temperature of a room and the price of time. She approaches Jill with a proposal designed to stabilize the company and to achieve what she frames as a double reconciliation: capital for Abbott Communications and a chance for Jill to convert history into stewardship rather than a sword. It is business logic threaded with emotional intelligence, a pitch that attempts to turn a fraught reunion into an elegant transaction. But Billy hears the music differently. To him, Sally's initiative is not a clever bridge, but an intrusion that confirms his worst suspicion, that his mother will always be summoned to catch him when he is mid-stride, that his victories are never fully his when Jill's shadow stretches long. He reads the offer as a prelude to control, a subtle reclaiming of the wheel he has only just gripped with confidence. The anger that rises in him is old, rooted in the dynamic where Jill's affection and expectations arrive as a package deal, and it interacts badly with the pressure he is under from investors, partners, and the relentless clock of a media landscape that punishes hesitation. He does not see Sally's diplomacy. He sees an ending around his authority at the precise moment he needs the town to believe he can anchor a storm. And yet, outside his viewpoint, the case for Jill's participation is not trivial. Subscribe our channel for more latest updates. She brings reputation, networks, and a calming effect on nervous capital. For a company at the edge of a daring pivot, that combination is oxygen. Sally's hope is that Jill's investment becomes a symbol, not of rescue, but of endorsement, the kind that steadies internal politics and signals to Genoa City that Abbott Communications' future has the blessing of the woman who understands the family's strengths and scars best. Still, intent rarely lands cleanly in this town. What one party frames as collaboration, another internalizes as interference, and those fault lines widen when the past is dragged to center stage. Jill's announcement that she will finally articulate everything about the fathers of Billy, and Kane reshapes the boardrooms before it even hits the living rooms. The legacy question has always floated like a rumor that everyone pretended not to hear, because to address it would require those in power to admit how much of that power rests on selective memory. If the story she unveils affirms a blood connection between the men, the practical effects will be immediate. Inheritance narratives change, succession analyses shift, partnerships that were erected on the assumption of distance will need to be reinterpreted with the closeness of kinship in mind. Kane, forced to answer for the opaque edges of his GC campaign at the same moment a potential family tie is declared, may find that the city is less forgiving of machinations when they appear designed to undercut a brother, rather than merely outmaneuver a competitor. The tone of scrutiny changes when betrayal feels intimate. Should Jill's truth point in the opposite direction, revealing that the notion of brotherhood has been a misapprehension leveraged for sympathy or advantage, then the repercussions will be different, but equally bracing. In that scenario, Kane's maneuvers would be reinterpreted as the acts of an outsider, striving for a seat he never thought he would be granted, and Billy's sense of violation would morph into the recognition that he has been framing his rival through a familiar lens that never fit. Either way, the revelation forces both men to confront the ethics beneath their strategies, because it is one thing to play hard in the market and quite another to reshape an entire corporate ecosystem on a lie. As Jill listens to their defenses, her silence is not neutral. It is evaluative. She has seen decades of ambition burn through this city. She knows when competence masks a cash flow problem, and when a takeover pitch is really an exit strategy in disguise. She also recognizes the opportunity inside crisis, and that is where Sally's proposal lives. From Jill's vantage point, investing in Abbott Communications could be the lever that encourages Billy to trade reactivity for architecture, to build something that lasts, rather than perpetually trying to outrun the next tremor. She knows too that a public partnership could convince Kane to recalibrate, to shift from clandestine accumulation to transparent coalition. The question that occupies her is whether either man is ready to evolve, or whether they are still too enthralled by their narratives to accept recalibration as strength rather than surrender. If she commits capital, she will demand terms that bake in accountability, milestones, disclosure, governance protections that prevent the company from becoming a monument to anyone's ego. If she declines, she risks watching the brothers throw their separate storms at each other until both enterprises drift into avoidable damage. The decision is complicated further by optics. To invest now may look like favoritism toward Billy, no matter how carefully structured. To stay out may look like abdication at the very moment the city expects her to shape the outcome. Jill understands that whatever she decides will be read not simply as a business move, but as a verdict on legacy around them. Genoa City does what it always does when secrets threaten to harden into facts. It speculates, aligns, hedges. Board members float contingency plans. Lawyers prepare scenario memos. PR teams draft statements able to pivot from celebration to contrition in a single paragraph. The siblings, allies, and antagonists who orbit Billy and Kane begin choosing language, brother, rival, partner, user, without knowing which will be accurate by week's end. In this atmosphere, Billy's anger at Sally's outreach becomes more than a personal reaction. It is a strategic risk. He cannot afford to make decisions out of resentment because the market reads mood as signal. If he missteps, if he rejects stabilizing capital in the name of pride, or attacks the messenger because she dared to broker a lifeline, he could damage the very independence he is so desperate to prove. Subscribe our channel for more latest update. Meanwhile, Kane's need to control narrative collides with the inevitability of Jill's disclosures. He can try to preempt, to rebrand his GC plans as visionary rather than predatory, to present himself as a reformer, intent on cleaning up a fractionalized sector. Yet, the success of that reframe depends on transparency he has not yet demonstrated. The city will want to see the contracts, the governance structures, the safeguards that ensure his consolidation serve stakeholders rather than a private ambition. Jill's presence turns those questions from optional diligence into a threshold test. In the end, the most consequential shift may not be the paternity truth itself, but how each man behaves in the hours around its release. If Billy can breathe through his indignation long enough to recognize that strength sometimes looks like accepting a partner who will challenge him, then Sally's initiative could become the hinge on which Abbott communication swings from volatility to durability. He would still be the architect. Jill would not design his flaws for him, but the scaffolding she provides could allow him to build higher without courting collapse. If Kane can convert exposure into evolution, using the scrutiny to retire the more opaque edges of his campaign and to invite oversight rather than evade it, he might surprise even his critics by emerging as a disciplined operator rather than a charming opportunist. Conversely, if both double down, if Billy mistakes help for humiliation, and Kane treats truth as an obstacle to be circumvented rather than engaged, then Jill's return will function as a spotlight that shows Genoa City exactly where to withdraw its patience and its money. That is the paradox of Jill's visit. It offers both men a path to legitimacy, even as it threatens to strip away the cover that has protected their worst habits. For now, Jill withholds her final decision, letting the city sweat and the principles reveal themselves. Her message, spoken more by example than declaration, is that legacy is not a shield. It is a responsibility. Billy will bristle, because bristling is how he covers the bruise left by years of being measured against expectations. And Kane will tighten his smile, because composure is how he hides the thrill of the next move. But the calculus has changed. The fathers they have chased or denied are about to be named not as ghosts that excuse dysfunction, but as facts that require maturity. Whether the revelation binds them into a stronger, begrudging fraternity, or snaps the last thread between them, the aftermath will be defined by what they choose next. Transparency or obfuscation, partnership or brinkmanship, stewardship or spectacle. Sally, perhaps the only one in the triangle thinking about durable outcomes rather than immediate victories, has laid out a map that could turn a scandal into a foundation. Jill, with her fingerprints on the town's history and her eyes on its future, holds the capital and the credibility to make that map more than theoretical. And Genoa City, never patient but always watchful, waits to see which man understands that in a place built on names, the only way to escape being trapped by one is to earn a new definition through the choices you make when the truth finally arrives. The signs that Audra had been trying to ignore for weeks finally arranged themselves into a single, unflinching truth. Whatever else Genoa City had taught her about leverage, about power, about the thrill of skating at the edge of a deal, none of it quieted the ache that came from losing Nate. His calm certainty had been a mirror in which she could almost believe the better version of herself existed. His cool, methodical ambition was the counterpoint to her kinetic, improvisational drive. Together, they had seemed inevitable until the one thing that dissolves inevitability crept in: mistrust, multiplied by choices that felt defensible in the moment and ruinous in hindsight. Rumors and corporate maneuvers, alliances formed for advantage rather than alignment, and the kind of strategic half-truths that power brokers tell themselves are harmless because no one gets physically hurt, except someone did, Nate's faith in her. And so, after circling pride and flirting with denial, Audra did the thing she swore she never would. She decided to make one final unequivocal bid for their future. Not a ploy, not a counter-offer, not a PR patch. A real attempt to reset the ground between them, knowing it might end with her hands empty. She prepared the way she would for any significant pitch, inventorying her missteps, mapping the pressure points, anticipating objections. She could name the exact moments where she'd chosen the expedient over the honest. Subscribe our channel for more latest updates. The time she'd interpreted Nate's caution as condescension and responded with a show of independence, so performative it read as betrayal. She would not pretend the past hadn't happened or reduce it to a misunderstanding. She would argue for growth the only way it could be argued for, by showing how pain had altered her reflexes. If she could get him to hear that, to see that the woman asking for another chance was not the same one who squandered the first, perhaps there could be a path to something steadier. In the romantic language of Genoa City, that hope quickly blossomed into a vision, brighter than she meant to let it. A life with Nate that included not just reconciliation, but permanence. She caught herself imagining proposals, a home chosen for privacy rather than optics, the absurd domestic normally of two people who used to live at boardroom velocity, learning how to move at the speed of morning coffee. It was reckless to think that far ahead, but hope is a cognitive hazard. Even the disciplines struggled to avoid. And yet, when she finally laid out her case, plain, vulnerable, unspun, Nate met it with the same clarity that once drew her to him. He would not rewrite what had been broken with a promise and a kiss. He did not punish her with cruelty, nor did he bargain for more time. He simply told her that trust, once hollowed out, cannot be resuscitated by willpower alone, and that his instincts, the ones he'd learned to obey after misreading too many people in both love and business, were not ready to call her safe. If Nate's refusal stung, it was because it landed precisely where she had tendered her sincerest offer. But what surprised Audra, in the quiet after, was that she did not spiral. Disappointment did not unmake her. She had spent enough of her life treating rejection as a dare to escalate. This time the lesson settled, without the usual rebellion. She had come to him not to manipulate an outcome, but to test whether the person she was becoming could be recognized by the person she wanted. He couldn't. Not yet. Maybe not ever. That hurt, but it also clarified. The question before her was not how to change his mind. It was what to build next. That would not require someone else's permission to be real. She surveyed the terrain the way only an operator with her instincts could. The media landscape was fracturing. Legacy empires were papering over structural rot with glossy acquisitions, and too many executives were playing defense while pretending to innovate. Audra could see a lane that didn't require her to beg her way back into someone's good graces. A portfolio approach that married nimble content properties to data-literate distribution. with strategic partnerships in places that had always underestimated her. She had relationships she could activate, not as a supplicant, but as a peer. She had a reputation that, while tarnished in certain corners, still carried value in others, because results talk louder than gossip. Most of all, she had the energy to start again, without repeating the shortcuts that had cost her the thing she had just failed to reclaim. The first move was symbolic. She stepped away from the whisper circuits that thrived on keeping her name in other people's mouths, declined a handful of invitations that promised proximity but no authority, and put her attention on the substance of a plan. She took meetings that were about product rather than politics, asked harder questions about governance and ethics than she would have a year ago. And when potential partners tried to flatter her into ignoring red flags, she walked. It wasn't penance. It was a strategic recalibration. The woman who once framed compromise as savvy began to define it as a tax taken by people who don't believe they can win clean. In private, she wrote operating tenets for herself. No deals that depend on secrecy to succeed. No alliances held together by mutually assured destruction. No narratives that require vilifying the last person who believed in her. They were the kind of rules that sound naive until you've lived without them and paid the price. And slowly, the city adjusted its gaze. Instead of waiting for her next misstep, the people who counted began asking what she was building. A boutique incubator with an eye for undervalued voices. A data backbone that could make mid-tier brands publisher strong without selling their souls to the biggest predators. A crosstown coalition that bypassed the traditional gatekeepers and forced them to compete on merit. With each conversation that left the past where it belonged, she felt the muscle memory of credibility return. Meanwhile, Nate returned to the rigor of his own life, with the relief and melancholy that follow a hard boundary set well. Subscribe our channel for more latest updates. Saying no to Audra wasn't a victory. It was the maintenance of a line he believed protected them both from repeating an old loop. He poured himself back into the work that had always kept him honest. Structural improvements rather than splashy plays. Investment in people rather than instruments. A deliberate refusal to conflate speed with wisdom. In the neat symmetry of fate, the city began to mirror their separate evolutions. Where once they had traveled in overlapping circles, their orbits drifted apart. His anchored in steadiness, hers in calculated reinvention. And the cynics who would have bet on a relapse, in one or both, had to recalibrate their prophecy as months without scandal accumulated.